My first difficult experience, LSD by D. This could also be a report of my 5-gram mushroom trip from 3 weeks ago, minus the nausea, as it was very similar and equally terrifying, but somewhat more devastating afterwards because it was from LSD, which had been very gentle with me up until yesterday. I've taken LSD numerous times over the past couple of years. My first experience was with half a hit of strong blotter, unperforated, no taste, body load, and lasted around 12 to 16 hours, but every time after that it was an 8 to 12 hour thing with very minor body load and nothing but positive experiences. I always wait 2 weeks between trips, even though the literature says a week should be fine. I'm 28, in pretty good shape, and try to live a healthy lifestyle. I watch what I eat, I lift weights, run, and don't drink or smoke. The most I've ever taken was 3 hits, a couple of times, and the last time, although I felt it was a bit too overwhelming, was a very positive experience. It was from the same sheet I took this dose off of. Around that time I was also experimenting with growing my own shrooms, and had some fruiting, so I made up my mind to take Terence McKenna's favorite heroic dose of 5 grams a couple of weeks later, with horrifying and decimating results, which brought us to 3 weeks after that mushroom trip, which was yesterday, when I took 3 hits. I work nights and sleep during the day, and after getting home from work Friday morning, I passed out and woke up at 6 p.m. I was trying to decide if I should go ahead and trip now or tomorrow, and after a couple of hours of back and forth, I decided to go for it. By now it was a little past 8 p.m. A friend had called and said she was going to stop by with her boyfriend to pick up some stuff for the weekend, so I had to wait for them to show up. They finally showed up around 9:30 and left at 10. I'm finally free of any obligations, and it's been 12 hours since I ate, so my stomach is totally empty. Perfect! I cut out 3 hits from the unperforated sheet of what used to be 25 hits, now looking like some weird Tetris block. I put it under my tongue and let it fully absorb for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then I swallowed. By 11 p.m. I start to come up feeling the energy, or anxiety, building up in my body. Some visual distortion started to appear, and I started to hear a slight echoing effect. I always get this with LSD. So far so good. I get under the covers and turn on my MP3 player, which contains my favorite music and some of Terence McKenna's lectures for later on when I'm coming down, like I always do. It's around 11:15 now, and I'm getting hit pretty hard, but nothing shattering. It's just really good with a hint of overwhelming, like the last time I took 3 hits. No biggie, I'm feeling good, but another 15 minutes pass, and something's different. I'm getting stronger sound distortions than usual, people talking downstairs in the background. The TV was on in the living room. Sounds very low-pitched and echoing harder than normal, but when I turn on the music, it sounds fine. This is interesting. I try not to pay too much attention to this and keep enjoying the experience, but something else seems wrong now. The music I'm listening to all of a sudden sounds like it's slowing down to a crawl, but the pitch remains the same. Wow, this is kind of freaky, so I feel like I should get up and look around to see what other strange effects I notice. Wrong move. When I stood up, I felt dizzy, feeling as though I'm short and stretched sideways, running out of breath, or I also feel like it's harder to breathe, and I automatically reach for water and drink some from the bottle like my life depended on it. Some of it ran down my face. I'm now thoroughly convinced I'm having a bad reaction to this chemical, feeling like I'm going to fade away, and I'm not ready to die here like this. Not yet. I definitely have issues letting go, but how can I not? What will my parents think when they find my lifeless body? What will happen to all those I care about? Come on, get it together. You're not gonna die. You're gonna pull through this, and you're gonna fight. If I say things, if I sing, if I act hyper, I can jumpstart my heart and have it beat faster and stronger so I can slip into unconsciousness and die. sheer terror at this point. Collapsing back on the bed, I put some music on. We'll hit play again since I had paused it previously when I started to freak out and get scared because I could hear it getting fainter and actually slowing down to a crawl, which obviously meant, at the time, that my heart was also slowing down. My senses are severely distorted and wouldn't sync up. For instance, when I would get up to turn a light on, I would see me getting up, but somehow felt like my body was still on the bed trying to catch up to what I was seeing, which was me standing up now, or was it the other way around? Was I still laying in bed, just thinking about standing up and visualizing it? I wasn't sure anymore. I kept mumbling about the chemical affecting my blood pressure and tried to make myself remember the words blood pressure, medication, and adrenaline like my life depended on it. But somehow, I just couldn't utter them. This was almost a repeat experience of my 5-gram mushrooms experience I ate 3 weeks ago when I had the most horrific trip of my life, except this was going to last twice as long. That last notion was enough to freak me out even more. This cycle kept continuing for a couple of hours where I would sit back in bed and calm down for 10 to 15 minutes. Then this would happen all over again. It was happening in waves, like as if it were psilocybin. At this point I had many crazy theories as to what was happening. One of them was I was having a mushroom flashback while I was tripping on LSD, which was the only plausible explanation because of the similarities. Looking back now, maybe I would have had a very profound experience if I would have just let go and accepted that I was dying, but it's really hard when your mind actually believes that you are. Anyway, then when things finally started to calm down, there was still some open-eye visuals and distortions, but none of the so-called life-threatening experiences. I started getting that uncomfortable body load feeling and had the revelation that this is part of the experience, and it totally depended on how the peak experience was. If it was a good trip, then there would be little to no body load, no physical manifestation, no buildup of toxicity. But if the trip was difficult, the end result would present itself as a body load. And this made sense at the time. I kind of chuckled at my own cleverness for figuring this out. Now I had to think of ways to get rid of this body load, and I remember I had some herbs stashed away, so I prepared that and took a hit. When I laid back down on the bed, a sense of calmness started to appear all around me. A body buzz started, and I had the revelation that this was what I had been missing from the trip, to calm my nerves all along. Now I was feeling more relaxed, less anxious, and I wanted to put on some tunes. The open-eye visuals also strengthened, but it was different. The patterns on the wall weren't really swirling, but they were pulsating now. The music was sounding heavenly, and I couldn't help myself but marvel at how clear it sounded and kept chuckling, saying, "Oh my God," and "This is awesome," every now and then, and it was. The feeling continued for about an hour, and I kept taking an additional hit every other hour till the 12th hour mark to prolong the experience and relaxation. This definitely decreased the feeling of the body load. I just tossed and turned in bed and listened to some Terence McKenna lectures, now having a better understanding of what he meant when he said difficult experience. I just never thought I'd have this sort of reaction from LSD, which has been gentle with me up until this point. I still feel it was the 5 grams of mushrooms I took 3 weeks ago that changed something in my brain chemistry. I've now been awake for 26 hours and felt like I have insomnia. Although there was no open-eye visuals or visual disturbances anymore, I still got a slight closed-eye visual, some white energy thing just burning and radiating like the sun, or even boiling. I also feel anxiety and slightly depressed, probably because I was worried that I will never feel the same now. I've thought like this before on mushrooms previously, when I feel like I'm mentally challenged and it's going to be permanent, but it always goes away and I come back to regular consciousness after about 6 hours or so. So it should have cleared up by now, but it hasn't. It's also possible that I feel this way because I haven't slept and I'll feel better once I do. But what use is it if I can't fall asleep? What if I'll never be able to go to sleep again? What if I'm still like this tomorrow when it's time to go to work? Negative thought loops still continuing, residuals of a bad trip, no doubt, or it could be an instant of a flashback. Right after the come down, I don't quite know how those work, not knowing when or if it's gonna stop. It is depressing and equally terrifying. The music I listened to while I was tripping was also giving me anxiety when I thought about it, for no good reason either. My head feels like it's heavy and kinda numb, almost as if it's not from the LSD but from the weed I smoked. It's just not clearing up, and it's lingering for way longer than I want it to. I have doubts about retrying these experiments now. This might very well be the last time I touch these things for a long while. A few more hours pass and it all starts to finally clear up, however, very slowly. I'm starting to get a minor headache, and it feels as though I'm going to start recovering. I've never been so happy because of a headache. I can feel my head again. I quickly swallow an Advil cap, anticipating some relief by the time I'll go lay down and fall asleep. I was able to go to sleep around 1 a.m. after some 30 hours of being awake. When I woke up the next day, that being today, I was fully back to normal. No hints of the haze or anxiety or depression I felt the day before. Now I'm wondering if these things actually precipitate or exacerbate a latent or existing mental disorder I might have. This second report comes from Erowid. Anxiety, Nothingness, and the Logic Machine by Jan Naumann. I want to try and give here a phenomenological description of a self-induced psychosis, which I experienced about 15 years ago, most likely in 1995. The peak of that experience was temporary complete eradication of my consciousness and personality in an extreme state of pure anxiety. Following that description, I try to describe the process that rebooted my personality and interpret the underlying psychological processes. My personal background and trauma connected to the event is that when my parents divorced, I was 7 years old. I experienced mild sexual abuse from the age of 13 to 15 years. As I started drinking and smoking around 13 years old, hash and more hard drugs beginning with the age of 16. By the age of 20, I was an acid head, enjoying much time on LSD and other psychedelics. The experience is located in a house that had been squatted in for over 10 years, but now the occupants were moving out and the owner regained control of his property. The atmosphere was depressing and the future uncertain. I was on my way to this house from our home in the village and had administered myself the orally strongest dose of LSD I've ever taken, about 500 micrograms. In the evening, only 2 of my friends stayed with me in the living room of that house. All the others were in the city, partying. I held a big cup of tea in my hands and felt the chemical starting to exercise its effects. For a moment, I had the impression that the cup in my hands was my brain, which I drank from. Then, this comfortable warmth spread throughout my body, a feeling of coming home, which signalized the start of the trip. The feeling that my brain opened up to all knowledge and wisdom was freely accessible and became a part of myself, and I a part of it. At one point, the walls, floor, and ceiling began to merge into each other. The world began to flow like a river. I experienced myself as a part of everything and completely integrated in the big picture, an atom in an ectoplasmic sea, an illuminated being of eternal dimensions. These optical and emotional hallucinations, as well as the grand thoughts, have been a general part of my LSD experience, and the reason why I took it. But then something exceptional happened. The trip hit hard. So hard that I completely forgot that I was under the strong chemical influence. This was usually a safeguard to remember while tripping that it's all a part of the trip. Now, this was gone. A few weeks before, I read George Orwell's novel 1984, which plays out a terrible vision of the future, with a complete monitored and surveillanced world with a secret thought police and constant war as means to control society and production. The anti-hero in Orwell's novel was captured by the thought police and tortured in the Ministry of Love in Room 101. In this room, the prisoners are faced with their worst inner fears. The walls around me acted like bubbles that are about to burst. I found myself in a reality I could not comprehend. I stood before one of my friends and begged him, "Help me, please. Please help me." None of them knew what I had taken. Neither did I. Now the anxiety centers in my brain. It really warmed up and felt naked. Total fear spread to each cell in my body. I realized that my two friends were actually members of the infamous thought police. I knew they came to expose me and torture me in room 101. In a panic, I stormed out of the living room into the kitchen and took hold of a bread knife. I wanted to defend myself by all means possible. I waited in the kitchen. Nobody came. If they would have come and forced me out, I would have killed them. Then I reasoned with myself and thought, this was not the solution. They were the almighty thought police and already in my head. So maybe I was the problem, and that it could be solved by a strike to the heart with the bread knife. But something inside me knew that this was not a solution, so I dropped the knife and went back into the living room. Now I was in room 101. I did not know my greatest fear, but there it was. It filled me out, each part of my body and every angle of my thoughts. No escape. There is no God. The walls were as thin as paper, and they were about to tear. And behind the walls was evil. Not a relative evil, but the ultimate, all-consuming, destroying, powerful evil. And I lost all hope. On LSD, time is perceived very different from the regular, common perception. Sometimes, time is not perceived at all. Only eternity, here and now, nothing else. To my great despair, this was the state I found myself in, a prisoner of the ultimate evil, without hope, without time. Nothing human to be found. My friends were sleeping, and I, or the last rudiments of I, were dissolving in eternal horror and hopelessness. All strength drizzled out of my body. And at last there was nothing more. Regeneration in the logic machine. Of course, I cannot describe the state of nothingness. Let the philosophers discuss it. Consciousness is registering a cramp. There is a transparent liquid vomit on the floor. Consciousness registers I am vomit. Consciousness registers wooden floor under the vomit. Consciousness registered I am the wooden floor and have always been the wooden floor. These are the first conscious moments after my personality had been dissolved by anxiety. I am laying on one of the sofas in the living room. Opposite on the other sofa my friend sleeps on. I am registering the whole room, not really sure of what I am or how I fit into this scenario. Slowly my body feels like it's returning to me. I conclude that I am not the wooden floor, since I and the wooden floor have very distinct and different proportions. There is a division and a separation between I and the rest of the room. This division came to my awareness by the increasing feeling of my physical form. Very shortly, when my consciousness registered the sofa after the wooden floor, I thought to be a sofa, but this happened almost simultaneously with recognizing myself lying on that sofa, so I had to smile at the thought of being a sofa. Now I saw my friend sleeping on the other sofa, and went softly to him, kneeling at the sofa. I compared myself to him and came to the liberating conclusion that I am a man. This whole process of regeneration did not take more than a few seconds. That which started the process I call the logic machine, and explain it further in my following interpretation of this phenomena. Psychological interpretation of the subjective experience of the LSD psychosis. The whole experience from the beginning of fear to nothingness had a duration of about 3 hours, as we later recapitulated. I now start the interpretation with the last paragraph, regeneration in the logic machine. In the first parts of the seconds in the consciousness awakening, there is no form or division. All that registers is one. This I interpret as a revival of the symbiotic state, where the child does not make a distinction between himself and the mother, as described in the Mahler's object relations theory. I thought a lot about how I came from nothingness to I through the consciousness. I am the wooden floor. It is an extreme state of being, like a small flash of consciousness that has no critical sense but accepts all. I believe that the logic machine is a part of my origin in my personality that dates back to my earliest childhood. It registers the surroundings and puts them into relations to itself. Because I had a healthy and safe childhood up until the first 7 years, this part of my personality had not been violated. This fundamental structure made it possible for me to heal the condition of the bad trip had caused me. That is, why this condition also was not a real psychosis, but only like a psychosis. The worst thinkable fear is expressed in the experience with one sentence: there is no God. Psychologically seen, the situation was a reproduction of the divorce. The underlying fear is the fear of separation, which is the base fear of my existence. That fear was made very real in the divorce of my parents, and the intimacy of my childhood had a sudden end. Through the deep impact of LSD, I was able to dive into these areas of my subconsciousness, and I was confronted with the inner terms and trauma that resulted from that time. All relations were hurt or disappeared when I lost faith in all others during the divorce. The separation was reality with all ugly consequences to my subjective experience and perception. For most of my adult life, I believed that the divorce was happening when I was 10 years old. Later on, through talks with my grandmother, I learned that I was 7. That meant I suppressed the first 3 years after the divorce from my consciousness. The ultimate evil that destroyed me is a projection of my own life world, which I separated in order to bear with the emotional trauma. The experience of this evil is a direct result of my fear of separation, not accepting the terms of the divorce because of the heavy emotional crisis. When I am in the kitchen during the bad trip, I contemplate suicide. Something inside of me rejects this as a doable solution. When I was in my early teens, I learned the technique of autosuggestion, reading about it, and also having my mother explain it to me. I used this for myself because I had the impression that life would be extremely difficult to deal with. I adopted subconsciously the attitude that I would never commit suicide, no matter how bad things turned out, no matter how bad things would go. It will be good again. This became a deep conviction for me, and I believe it was the reason why I survived the situation in the kitchen. The hallucinations and grand thoughts had their own origin in the impact of the lysergic acid on the brain, and are a natural effect of the acid consumption. Those were not part of my personality, but a desirable and coveted result of the LSD intake. That is why this experience was not a real psychopathological psychosis, but merely a pseudopsychosis. I felt inspired by Timothy Leary in These Days, who was an American psychiatrist who believed LSD could be used to understand a man's mind. This third report comes from Erowid. Absolute Disaster, but Worth It, by Mesqualero. It has been 3 years since this event happened, but most of it is so sharply ingrained on my psyche that I could never possibly forget. The blotters were called Fat Freddy, or Fat Freddy's cat, and just by looking at them you could tell they were going to be interesting. One side had a white background with a Fat Freddy and stars in red ink, and the other side was a part of a larger picture, which only the coolest of the cool would ever get to see. I considered myself an experienced psychonaut. My dealer specifically warned me and my friend, whom I will refer to as B, to go very easy with these trips. She suggested we eat 1/4 of the blotter to start off with. But as soon as she handed the blotter over to B, he popped his in his mouth straight away. I looked at him incredulously, and I laughed nervously, saying, "I can't believe you did that. Now I'm gonna have to eat mine to be on the same wavelength." Straight away I could tell we were in for an interesting night. We got in my car and drove around town looking for the house where we were supposed to meet up with this girl named Kay. I thought I was in love with her at the time. She also enjoyed fucking around with me. She was gonna trip with us, and after 30 minutes of not being able to find the house, we gave up. B was becoming insistent, urging me to drop the tab before we got out of sync. I grudgingly popped the tab in my mouth. It had no taste, and after 5 minutes I started to feel the initial anxiety or tenseness, and the buzziness was a lot earlier than I was hoping for. We decided to try to make it home before it came on too hard. Believe it or not, only 10 minutes after dropping the tab, it became too risky to drive, and we decided to park the car at a friend's house and walk to the place K was supposed to be. Note: mistake number 1. The town I was staying in has a very bad vibe, especially at night, and it's not the place for heavy tripping. We started to walk all around, and all around us it was very quiet. It seemed that wherever we walked, everything went dead silent, and that everywhere in front of us was darkness, and everywhere behind us was being created by us, and it was light. It felt like we were two angels stranded here on Earth, and that we had always been like this. At the time, we were both very interested in the dark arts, magic, vampirism, and Golden Dawn. We were discussing this as we walked. This was a possible mistake. Around us, the light posts were bending and twisting, coiling, and we could see waves in the fabric of reality. The road was like a rolling sea of asphalt, and we were generally feeling good at this point. The acid was strong, but not unbearable. About an hour into it, as we walked past some houses still on the way to find Kay, realizing that it was a waste of time, I thought I could hear people sitting on their balconies talking about us and making fun of us. People who drove past us seemed to stare and shout things at us as if we had some big sign on our head saying, "Look at these hopeless trippers." I started to feel very sad and angry at the same time, and I also felt the emptiness of my city, the total negativity, and it began to eat away at me. I started wringing around my hands over and over, clenching and unclenching my fists, saying, "Stupid fucking humans, worthless fucking scum." It was about this point in time that I started to walk through a massive golden orb weaver's spider web and had the sensation of being bitten 2 to 3 times on the face. I screamed and started pulling bits of web and trying to brush off whatever had bitten me off my body. I was screaming, "I've been bitten, oh fuck man," and B just said, "Stop freaking out, man, you're just tripping. Nothing bit you." All he saw was me pulling bits of nothing out of my face. Well, whether it was the spiders or the surge of adrenaline from being bitten, I'm not sure, but it set me off big time. All I could feel now was emanations of pure hate overcome me. I felt like I was channeling an entity that totally disliked humans and Earth. We decided to try and make it back to my house before anything bad happened. I was constantly saying, fuck, 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 stupid humans. I swear I'm gonna kill someone. From this point on, I am only explaining what happened from my perception. A lot of the following may be hard for some people to believe in actuality. It is also quite a fragmented story, so sorry about that. I had to get away from B because I seriously thought I was gonna kill him. I ran so fast and so far that the world seemed to blur and my legs were moving off their own accord. I remember vomiting as I ran, but I didn't care. I just spat out the remains of my vomit away and kept running. And when I stopped, it felt like a wind whooshed up to catch with me. It felt like the whole world had gone up to catch with me. I swear I ran at least 2 kilometers in less than 2 minutes. This is where I can hardly remember anything. I remember sitting under a lamppost screaming, "Please, God, fucking help me. I'm gonna kill someone or kill myself, Jesus Christ." I had the feeling that I was the chosen one and that this was the vessel through which Armageddon would arrive. All the votes from the consciousness and existence were being tailed through me. Continue creation or destroy everything. And when the votes were tailed, I would be the one to sing the sum of creation out of existence if necessary. It sounds outrageous, but if you can imagine the pressure and alienation you would feel if you were given such a task, then you would understand. After this, I became completely overwhelmed by the entity and do not remember the next 30 minutes. The next thing I remember is me walking without a shirt down the middle of the main road, with both hands in the fuck you position, shouting, "I am the fucking end of creation. You are all going to die, you fucks. I am God, I am Satan, I am something inconceivable. I remember walking off the road into the sidewalk, and I can hear sirens, and I see the flash of blue and red. I suddenly have a flash of sanity, and I say, "Oh, fuck," quietly. A cop gets out of the car and shines his torch in my eye as another cop car pulls up behind him. I say, "Oh, fuck," a bit louder this time, and the cop hears me say, "That's right, mate. Oh, fuck. You've had your fun." There are now 4 large policemen approaching me with torches flashing in my eyes. This next part is extremely fragmented and probably didn't happen. I remember a group of policemen surrounding me as I screamed something to the effect of, "I am something for which your insignificant little minds have no capabilities of understanding. I am of all creation. I am Satan. I am God. And because of humanity, I am going to destroy you all, you fucking filthy humans. I'm going to fucking kill you all. 170,000 years ago on this earth, this fucking wretched planet." In my mind, I could see the police cars rising off the ground silently. I felt like I was floating above the ground and small objects were flying around me. I was emanating tremendous kinetic energies. As the police discussed what the hell they were going to do with me, I could hear what they were thinking. The fear in their minds that they were witnessing something incomprehensible, that they should call the army. Anyone. I was answering their questions before they asked them. I told them that there was nothing that they could do to me because the world would very soon come to an end. The votes were still tallying inside me, but I could still feel the end coming on. It would soon be over. I blacked out. I am now on the ground. A large police officer has his knee between my shoulder blades while another one is holding down my legs. They are asking me if I committed various crimes around the neighborhood. What did you do at such and such? Why did you break their letterbox? Did you steal this car? Did you piss on this guy's lawn? Some ludicrous bullshit. And I'm saying, how the fuck should I know? My arms are handcuffed beside me, and I'm screaming, "Someone please fucking help me," because there are wasps and ants crawling in and out of my mouth, stinging me. There are 2 voices coming from my mouth. One very scared sounding me, the regular me, and a very deep growling voice that is the voice of the entity, gnashing and growling and reciting ancient prophecies in different language. The pain from the wasp's bites is so bad I have to chew at the grass so I don't bite my own tongue off. Meanwhile, the entity is making my voice growl like an animal. Very real, scary kind of growl. As I'm screaming, "Help me," the policeman is very worried for me and says, "Mate, I'm trying to help you out. What have you taken?" The entity takes over and does an evil laugh and starts spitting. An ambulance arrives and the paramedic flashes his light in my eyes and says, "Nope, he's gone," and injects me with what I think was 30 milliliters of Valium. They wait and the entity still struggles against the police. And another shot and I'm out. In the ambulance, all I can remember is that I said, "Hello, Bob," to the paramedic because I still believed I had an amazing psychic power. I wake up and I am in a small concrete room. I am chained to a chair. I am watching myself, but I'm not really in control of my body. The entity has control. Surrounding me are very high-ranking military personnel. They are in front of me, and in front of me is an intelligence officer, a flying officer, Ackland. He is questioning me about a secret military code, locations of secret installations, to my knowledge of interdimensional travel, and of secret technologies. The entity answers them in that sophisticated, superior growl. Having decided that I am a threat to security of Earth, they decide to launch me into the sun in a nuclear missile. I am in a sealed cubicle made out of some kind of bone-colored carbon fiber material. There doesn't appear to be any seams. Very strong, it is just a bigger coffin. There are strange symbols and diagrams inside it. There is an alarm going off and a countdown. I can hear the tallies for the end of the world counting down, almost in sync. The countdown loops and loops for the remainder of the night. Destroy, create forever. I wake up again and I am in the hospital. My arms are handcuffed behind me. There are 2 security guards on a 24-hour vigil, making sure I don't run away. I look at my clothes and shoes on the floor. They see me looking at them, and they fold their arms and puff up. I laugh and I say, "Rightio then." As soon as they see I'm awake, a nurse comes in with a huge needle, and I squirm away. I say, "Holy fuck," and she grabs my arm and says, "That's right, holy fuck," and injects me. Dad comes, and he has a sad look in his eye. I say I'm sorry and that I love him. And I look at my arm and I pull out an IV line and blood starts to spurt out. And I say, "Oh no." But when he looks at my arm, he says, "What?" It stops. I say, "Oh, don't worry, you don't want to know." That's it. All I had to do then was sign out and I was fine. The ambulance cost was $180. I had severe rash marks and bite marks all over my body. 2 bite marks that could have been a spider bite on my face and my neck. I still use psychedelics, and it has taken me ages to integrate what happened. I'm sorry if this is too jumbled to understand. There was no easy way to explain what happened. One of the only level 5 trips I've had, and the other being a level 5 MEO, DMT, and salvia trip. The following is information I received from the entity and why it was so angry. The entity story. Now the information was becoming clearer and clearer from this entity I was receiving or becoming. I, or this entity, was once the sum of awareness in a vast amount of time and space. The awareness was once of a group of awarenesses which come together to form the awareness of creation, what some people would call God. This entity, at the beginning of all creation, had seen that sometime in the distant future, Earth would host a civilization that would develop such advanced technology it would then threaten the very fabric of the universe. This entity so loved its part of creation that it couldn't bear to lose anything and decided to try to destroy Earth. So this entity went to the Earth and attempted to seduce her so that he could bind her power to him and control the Earth's destiny. The Earth spirit was enamored and agreed to sexual union with the entity. Celestial beings have sex too, though on a much different level than we can understand. As this was happening, the awareness, who was the overlord of Earth, my girlfriend Kay, and a good old friend of the entities, stepped in and alerted the other awarenesses as to what was happening. Together as creation, they decided that what the only entity was trying to do was against the law of creation and banished him to the Earth to incarnate as human until the end of creation. Little did I know that all the awarenesses will incarnate on Earth before long.